Hey friends, it's Robin. Today we are starting a really fun collab project that I am doing with my friends. This idea was thought up by Heather from AUDIOBOOK, and she invited a whole bunch of us along for this project. So I will have all of their channels linked down below. So definitely go check out their channels so you can see their versions of this. But the idea behind this project is, how do we find books? What types of books do we add to our TBRs? Where do we get them? How do we decide what books we put on our TBRs, if they stay there, how long it takes us to find books, like how many books are we adding? It's really just kind of an exploration on how all of us find our books. And it's been very interesting talking to each other throughout the month of May, because we did give ourselves a full month for this project, and it's been really interesting to see how many books each of us have had added and like how fast we added books. And I'm definitely curious to see everyone's versions of these videos. So the way that I'm planning to structure this video, today is the 16th, so we are halfway through May. So for the first 2 weeks of the month, I have been taking either screenshots or screen captures of me finding these books, like where I have found them, and adding them to my TBR. And I am going to go through those 2 weeks of books. I don't remember what I've added, and we're just going to go through them one book at a time and talk about how I found it, why I added it, and if the book is already released, I am going to do a try a chapter for that book. I decided to do it this way because I have some theories on how I add books to my TBR. I thought it would be fun to do this video as kind of an experiment on whether or not I know how I add books to my TBR, and if I have a good idea of like what types of books and things that I add. So I do have some theories, and we're going to see if they are correct. One, think that the way that I add books to my TBR, or like the amount of books that I add to my TBR, is completely dependent on how much time I'm on social media. What I mean by that is, if I am posting to Instagram and sharing cover reveals and all of this stuff, I think I'm adding a lot more books to my TBR because I am actively looking at books. This idea came up because I'm sure you can hear it in my voice. I got sick the second week of May, and my daughter got very, very sick the second week of May. And I think that happening, rather than me having more time because I'm sitting around like not being productive, I think it actually took away from the number of books that I added to my TBR because I wasn't feeling good. And so that mood, that feeling of just being like very blah, drastically changes like how many books I'm interested in, because I'm not interested in anything when I'm sick. So that's my first prediction. My second prediction is that I add more future releases to my TBR than backlist or currently released books. Because I have started doing over the last couple of years all of the anticipated releases, cover reveals, and monthly release posts, including like all of my ARC reading and stuff like that, I feel like I'm paying a lot more attention to the books that are coming out later. I'm, following authors and publishers and PR groups and things like that. And so even if it is an indie title, I'm often hearing about it pretty early. And so I think that the majority of the books that I add to my TBR, I'm not actually going to be able to read for the try chapter. I'm going to count a future release as anything that I can't read the first chapter of, so anything that is after May 31st. My third prediction is that the books that I add to my TBR are going to be like grouped by genre. If I am reading a fantasy book and super into that fantasy book, I feel like I add a whole ton of fantasy books to my TBR. It doesn't dictate what I'm going to pick up next, which I already know that about myself because you can see that in my wrap-ups and stuff. But I do think that when I'm enjoying that book, I want to have more of that thing for the future. Not necessarily similar books, but like a whole bunch of contemporary romances, or a whole bunch of this trope, or a whole bunch of this thing. Those are my three big predictions. I guess before we get into anything else, we can talk about how I organize my TBR, because I guess that's going to be a pretty important thing to understand for this video. I have my TBR organized in a couple of different groups. So first, we obviously have my Goodreads, and my Goodreads is predominantly used for authors that I have read from before and am keeping an eye on their next release, and then upcoming releases. It is very rare for me to put a backlist title on my Goodreads TBR. And it's not because like, oh, I don't want to read that book or whatever. It's just not how I use my Goodreads. My Goodreads is mostly used for content purposes. I'm going to call it backlist TBR is on my Kindle. I have a privated Amazon wish list that I just call Kindle TBR. Every single month, I have my own monthly TBR. Those are the books that I pick up throughout the month. I am not one that goes to other TBR lists and browses and tries to find something to read. I add books to my monthly TBR list, as you can see here for May. I'm not going to read this many books in a month. I purposefully do that so that I feel like I have options. So that if I'm like, oh, I'm really not feeling what in my head I thought I wanted to read next, there are other things for me to pick from, and I don't have to go to one of those lists and be overwhelmed by the options. I get really, really bad decision fatigue, and it's frustrating. And this is the best way I have found to combat that. And so where I am adding things to my TBR is going to vary based on what the book is. We are going to go through the first 2 weeks of books, and we can talk about why I added that book or where I found it or whatever. And then if that book is available, we will read the first chapter. And at the end, we will talk about what books I'm going to keep on my TBR at that time. We'll also talk about part 2 of this video. I'm going to do a vlog reading some of these. I don't yet know what that's going to look like because I don't know what books are going to be on that list. Maybe we end up with only like 3 books left on my TBR after the try chapter. We're going to let the TBR dictate what the vlog looks like, but we're going to start with the first round of try chapter. So let's go read some books. All right, so it is time for the first of the try chapter. I think the way that we're going to do this is I am going to load each of them, and then we'll have a little discussion on like why I added it and where I found it and all of those things. And then if we can, I will read that first chapter. So I think that's how we're going to do this. I am set up in bed. I have my Kindle, I have my page turner, I have some snacks, I have a drink. So we are going to get nice and cozy, and we are going to get into all of the books that I put on my TBR for the first 2 weeks of May. Let's take a look at the first book, Wet Hot Summer by Sarah Brenton. And I actually got this because I am subscribed to Sarah Brenton's newsletter because she wrote a trilogy that I really liked. And when I saw this cover, I was like, well, I definitely need that. And this does not come out until later this year. I think it's June. Yeah, this doesn't come out until June 9th. So this is the first one to go into the tally for a future release. So obviously this is not one that I'm going to be reading the first chapter of. I'm not entirely sure if I should be talking about the synopses for these, if that's what you're even here for. I'll just keep it really brief. I guess for this one, we're following a heroine who is getting married, a marriage of convenience. Turns out she's married already. She got drunkenly married in Vegas, and he turns up, and they have a second chance romance. The next book that I added to my TBR, I actually added while I was browsing Kindle Unlimited, and this is pretty common where I will just kind of browse that explore page. This one jumped out at me partly because of the cover and then the author. So I was taking a look because I was like, I know that I have added something by this author to my TBR, and it finally dawned on me that she has a release coming, I think in 2026. There is a trilogy that she is releasing that I have on my radar. And so I thought this would be the perfect time to add one of her backlist books to my TBR so I can see if her writing is something that I enjoy, since I did have my eye on that new trilogy from her. I believe this one is a Fae portal fantasy. I didn't really read the synopsis, I won't lie. The first chapter of this one opens up with our heroine, who is a human, and she is an author, and her books have taken off on this island where the Fae live. She is traveling to this like Fae world to do a book tour, and there were all of these problems that resulted in her getting to this place really, really late. Because of that, they teamed her book tour up with another author who I think is going to be a Fae. Now the two of them are going to be touring together, and I think they're going to have a rivals to lovers romance. I actually really enjoyed that like opening chapter. I feel like it's going to be a really great summer read. The next book is one that I found on Instagram while I was scrolling, and I actually found this through the cover illustrator. This is part of a series that I have heard of. I vaguely remember the first book going around when it came out. So the book that I added is called Meeting Millie by Claire Ashton. And I believe that this is a sapphic romance set at Oxford. And I think the main characters are older. Don't hold me to that, but I vaguely remember this going around and this like being on my radar. Let's go read the first chapter of this one and see if it's going to be a keeper. So I just finished the first chapter of Meeting Millie. I don't have a ton to go on in this one. The first chapter is a flashback to them meeting in college. They are both Oxford students and they're studying law, and it's just their like first meeting. And one of our heroines is kind of awkward. She grew up in a house where like her older sister and her mom are very like together and accomplished, and she kind of feels like the odd one out, like the ugly duck. She is completely infatuated with Millie, who is the other heroine, who just seems very self-assured. I have no idea where it goes from there. The writing was enjoyable. Like, it was really easy. Like, I flew through that first chapter. So it is something that I'll keep on my TBR. I just don't have much to go on from that first chapter. So the next one I once again found on Instagram. I found this one through Tori Loves HEAs. The cover is what initially caught my attention. At the time that I saw this cover, I was reading A Love Most Fatal by Kath Richards, and I absolutely loved that book. When I saw this, I was like, might be worth a shot. This is book 2, however, in the series. This doesn't come out until June 5th, but I did go and add the first book, which is called Lovesick. We are going to try the first chapter of that one. So I'm going to go give that one a try. I have no idea what the synopsis is for this one, so we're going to find out together. Okay. I read the prologue and the first chapter of Lovesick. I kind of want to keep reading. This is going to be ridiculous. After the first couple of sentences, I was like, wait a minute, what is this? One of the reviews just starts with, what the hell did I just read? And that sums up how I feel. Huge content warnings for this, for attempted suicide and institutionalization due to mental health. And the author does have a note at the beginning that she took a lot of liberties with the depictions in here. And so she's like, do not use this as reality. This is bravely fictionalized. But it seems like the heroine is a psychopath who is institutionalized because she kills people or attacks people or is violent towards people. The hero comes from a very abusive family, has some sort of like blackout, and finds himself on top of this building, and he's being rescued. And I assume he ends up with her because it sounds like they form some sort of unhealthy relationship, and they get out of said institution and go on a killing spree. And I'm super intrigued. I really want to read this. I really want to read this. Do I think it's going to be good? No. No, I don't. Do I think I'm going to be super entertained? Yes. And that's exactly what I want right now. So I kind of want to keep reading this one. I'm not going to because I'm going to finish this video, but I really want to. The next book is a very similar situation to the last one. I was flipping through Instagram stories and the cover really intrigued me. It's about an escape room, which sounded really cool. And then when I started reading the description, it said that it was a spin-off of a different book. And so I went and added that one to my TBR. It's called Playing for Keeps by Tristan Crone, author I have never heard from before. Grumpy Sunshine, Plus Size Rep, Board Games, Cozy Sweet. I'm always looking for new authors, so we are going to go download it and we are going to give the first chapter a read. Okay. We have relocated because my husband decided that he wanted to take a nap. We have our first flop. I didn't even make it through this first chapter, and I don't want to keep reading it. I hate the writing. It feels so sporadic. She will be tying a kid's shoe and then thinking about something else, and then suddenly she's walking down the street and then she's talking about this thing, and then she's complaining about the elevator, and then she's back on this thing again, and then she's taking a shower and her phone's ringing, and I was just like, and then we finally got to like the game part, and the dialogue is terrible. Hi, how have you been? Hanging in there. Started a new class today after little to no notice. You? I hate it. I hate it. We're going to return it and move on. The next one I actually found on NetGalley, and I found it while looking through audiobooks. It looks like this one has an audiobook coming out at the end of May, but the ebook was already out. This one is a funny, dark romantasy, so we're gonna give this one a shot. I've never heard of this author, never heard of this book. I'm not even reading the first chapter. I'm not even. First of all, the dedication to the girlies. I hate the word girlies. I hate it with every fiber of my being. To the girlies out there who collect morally gray book boyfriends, which is another phrase I hate, like Pokemon. Literally nothing about that dedication gives me any hope of this being good. The content warnings is this book contains triggers. If you believe magic and sorcery is the devil's work, please close the book now. I'm out, not even getting to the first chapter, so mistakes were made with that one. Let's move right along. The next book is one that I found through Elizabeth Stevens, who is an author that I really love. And the cover for this book is stunning. This is book 2 in the series. I added book 1 to my TBR. It's called Make Me. This is another dark, like, crime romance because it's what I was reading at the time, and I really want to find some more books to like scratch that itch. And the covers. So yeah, we're gonna try Make Me by Summer O'Toole. We're off to a very good start in here. The content warning is like a vague description, and then it links to her website. But the last chunk of this is, this book will not be for everyone, and please, for the love of God, if you know me in real life, don't read this. I love that so much. This is going to be the last one for now because my daughter is actually on the way home. But Make Me by Summer O'Toole, I'm invested in this one. It seems like the hero of this one is the villain, like straight up villain, not like he's a little morally gray, like misunderstood. No, he's like a serial killer. The heroine, her best friend is murdered. I don't know if the killer is the hero. It opens up with her being interrogated by a detective because she witnessed her best friend's murder, and they're trying to get any sort of identifier from her. She sees a tattoo on his hand. It seems like they know who this is, but his alibi is ironclad or whatever. That's how it ends. I'm definitely going to keep reading this one. So we're all gonna pretend that this pimple in the middle of my forehead doesn't exist, okay? Cool, awesome. It has been like 2 days or something like that since I did the first half of this. In that first half, it was like 82 degrees, and today when I dropped off my daughter at daycare, it was 39, and I'm now back under a heated blanket, so that's fun for me. So we're just gonna pick up right where we left off. This one I also found on Instagram through Talk About Swoon, who I actually get a lot of books from. Since adding this one, I have seen this around a lot, and I actually think some of my friends have read it as well, and that is Scrum by Ava Tenney. This is a polyamorous novella, and I think one of them is a rugby player, the heroine is a rugby player, and this is an MFF, polyamorous romance. We do not get enough female-female polyamorous romances. So I'm really excited for this one. I really hope it's one that I end up loving. I took a quick intermission to take some meds, and make myself some lunch. But I did finish the first chapter of Scrum, and I'm excited to read this one. I think it's going to be great. This is told from multiple points of view. It opens up with our main character. I don't remember her name because it was told in her POV. Millie. She is a sex worker, and she says that she has been like squirreling away every penny so that she can afford to go to culinary school. And so she is not renewing her contract. and is going to be moving to Paris for culinary school. And after her final client, she goes downstairs to like get herself some dinner and a drink and read over the acceptance letter again. While she is there, she ends up meeting this woman, Izzy. Izzy and her husband, John, end up inviting the other heroine to eat with them. And so I think it's going to be a polyamorous romance between the married couple and her. And I assume the main conflict is going to be that she is moving to Paris soon. It was very well done. So I'm excited to keep reading that one. The next one was a screenshot from Caroline Reed's books, and this one was a complete cover ad. Scotch on the Rocks by Elliot Fletcher. This book in particular isn't out yet, so I ended up adding book 1 to my TBR, Whiskey Business, and this is definitely a cover that I've seen floating around, but I've never put it on my TBR. I have literally no idea what it's about. When I open up the book, it has like a little blurb up at the top, and it says, opposites attract when a fish out of water actress and a grumpy Scottish whiskey distiller are forced to work together. I'm gonna read the first chapter and then I'll be right back. Just finished the first chapter for Whiskey Business, and it was all right. I think it's something that I will keep on my TBR. I don't know if it's something that I'm like itching to read right this second. It seems like the heroine is an actress whose career was like just taking off, and through context clues, it sounds like someone like an ex or coworker, whatever, shared a naked photo of her and kind of like blacklisted her from the industry, and she stopped getting jobs. She has been struggling ever since. She loses her last living family member, who was her grandfather, and she leaves London and goes back up to Scotland and is staying at the manor where her grandparents lived. She's kind of trying to figure out what the next step of her life is. Of course, I just noticed that my microphone wasn't plugged in, so hopefully the audio isn't totally fucked for those last 2 clips. I'm gonna keep it on my TBR for right now, but I'm not gonna keep it downloaded. I don't think it's gonna be one that I read right now. The next one is another book that I added because I was absolutely obsessed, am absolutely obsessed with A Love Most Fatal by Kath Richards. I was on her page just like browsing because she had shared this like Mafia May giveaway. The post directly below that was for a book called Resilient Love. The cover is stunning. I also had heard of this because Tori Loves HEA had talked about this because this has bipolar disorder in it. This doesn't come out until June 26th, but it is something that I plan to be downloading right away. But it is not one, obviously, that I can be doing for this try chapter. This is the last one from the first week of May. I found on Kindle Unlimited, was intrigued by the cover. The first one is called Voyer Cafe, and it's about these 2 people who end up having to like share their like dream business space. She runs a coffee shop and he runs like a motorcycle repair, and so she's super annoyed because it's ruining the coffee shop because it's so loud. So I just finished the first chapter of Voyer Cafe. Just don't see a time where this ever is something that calls to me. There's nothing bad about it. It's just whatever. The heroine owns a coffee shop. Her landlord had always promised that whenever he retired, he would sell her the space, and instead he sells it to this guy, Lucas, who wants to open up a repair shop. He wants both sides of the business, and so he's giving her 6 months. They obviously get off on the wrong foot. That puts us at 12 books, which means that it took me 5 days to hit 10 books. Technically, 3 of them were from the 30th. So if you want to be really technical, they're not all from May, but yeah, a week. It took me a week to hit the 10 books. So I am going to do the rest of the try chapter, but I think what I'm going to do is I am first going to insert me wrapping up those first books so that we can talk about whether or not my assumptions about how I add books are correct or not. So I'm going to insert that right here. Editing Robin here because shock of all shocks, I'm sure I forgot to film this clip, but I do want to do a quick wrap up for those first 10 books, and I was not about to get ready, so this is what we get. I want to just quickly talk about, how long it took me to reach those 10 books for this collab. I want to talk about whether or not my assumptions were correct, where I find books, how quickly I add these books, things like that. So it took me 5 days in order to read or to reach 11 books added to my TBR, which isn't super surprising, I guess. One of the things that I said at the beginning of the video, one of the assumptions that I made was that my mood is going to drastically impact the number of books that I add to my TBR. And obviously you didn't see it in that first section because I added all those books within 5 days of each other, but you will see it next when I continue on with the try chapter. I added 11 books to my TBR in the first 5 days of the month. The rest of the month, I add 10 more books. That's it. That is because I got sick and my daughter got sick, and I am not the type of person that sits online or even really reads when I'm not feeling well or when I'm stressed. I just become a wallowing little gremlin and don't want to do anything. And so that assumption is definitely correct. I added so many books in those first couple of days of May because I was like, was ready to take on the world in those first couple of days of May. And it all just really went downhill after that. The second assumption that I made was that I was going to add more future releases to my TBR than current releases. And by watching that first section, you're going to think, Robin, very wrong. I added 9 books that I was able to read the first chapter of, and only 2 were future releases. However, I forgot to log when I was saving things to my Instagram folder where I save all of the books that I want to look into. At the end of this video, we're going to just go through that whole thing. Because I wasn't logging it, I have no idea when I added any of those books. I just know that they're there. And so I don't actually know when throughout the month that I added them. But I can tell you that of the, I think it was like 45 books or something that I added to my TBR, almost 30 of them were future releases. So I was correct. It is the majority of the books that I add that are future releases. That just wasn't reflected in that first section because I forgot. The third assumption that I made was that what I was reading was going to impact the books that I was downloading or adding to my TBR, and it does continue into the next section as well. I had read A Love Most Fatal, and all I wanted to do was find something to rival that or like meet that desire. And so I was adding so many dark romances, mafia romances, but not typical dark romance. I wanted dark romance, but like make it ridiculous. It's definitely the vibe that I ended up reaching. So I guess I was pretty much spot on with most of my assumptions. And I guess the last couple of things that I want to wrap up from that first section are, was this a good representation of how many books I add to my TBR in the month? Or was me adding books to my TBR altered by the fact that I was filming this video? I would like to say no, it wasn't. But I will say that there were books that I went and added to my Amazon list that I may not have if I wasn't filming this video. And not because I wasn't interested in it, but some of them would have just been like mental notes that I made to myself, like, oh, I'm going to add that one to my TBR. But because I was filming this video, I can't obviously like share my inside thoughts. So in order to capture that, I had to go and add it to my Amazon list. And so I think there were a couple of instances of those. However, I don't think that there were very many. And was this a good depiction of how many books I add to my TBR? I think it did a good job of showing the dichotomy of me adding books to my TBR. And then how do I find books to add to my TBR? I pretty much knew this, but it was either on my Kindle For You page or Instagram. And so that is the little summary on how I add books to my TBR. We are going to go continue on with the try chapter. And then at the very end, like I said, we're going to go through that Instagram folder since I completely forgot that it existed. So let's read some more books. I don't have nearly as many books for the second week of May. The first book that I added to my TBR was this book that I found on Kindle Unlimited. The cover is definitely what intrigued me. And then when I went and looked at the reviews, everybody was talking about how unhinged this book was. And I was like, well, now I need to read it. I think it's pretty short, if I remember correctly. Yeah, 178 pages. And it is called Cutthroat by Octavia Grant. We're gonna give it a try. The prologue and first chapter is so bizarre, and I'm so intrigued. The prologue is the heroine like addressing the reader, almost like a response online where she's like, I know the only reason you're all here is because you want to know the real story behind what happened. I've gained like 23,000 followers on social media in the last X number of days. And she's like, and the truth is, it's all real. Like, I did all of it. And I have no regrets. And then the first chapter is her like at home and talking about how she always wanted to be a wife, and she's also a lawyer who puts in like all these hours and does all this thing, but she's not going to let her man down. And so she's like, you know, I do all this stuff for him. I sleep with him, whatever he wants. I make him food. He better appreciate everything that I do. And it's told in this kind of like weird way because it's omniscient. So you are getting simultaneously the heroine and the hero, not the heroes, but like the husband's thoughts, like simultaneously, which is way different than anything I've ever read. But you know, the hero he's not faithful to her. He makes a comment about how she's like his everything and all of that, but like he can't rob the world of what he has to give. And you get the impression that he cares for her and he sees her as his real thing, but clearly not monogamous. And she totally thinks that they are everything. He even makes a comment about how she can't like come visit him at the office anymore because he started mixing work and pleasure. And I'm like, some shit is gonna go down. I'm just so intrigued. So the next book was scrolling through Instagram. I follow Shae, who is an author that I have read from before and really liked. She shared a post promoting her next book, which is the sequel to Just Right. I always had it in my head that Just Right was cutesy contemporary. Apparently it's MMFM, polyamorous, and like super steamy. What were the other microtropes in here? It's an established triad plus another, and then chronic pain and illness rest. So in hindsight, this should have been obvious, but Just Right by Shae is a Goldilocks and the Three Bears retelling. MMMF and Just Right. So it opens up with the heroine. She's like out at this lake and she's writing affirmations and like doing her thing. And she gets lost on her walk back and she stumbles across this massive, beautiful house. And she's like, I need to use a bathroom. I'm absolutely starving and my phone is dead. So she ends up breaking a window and going in. After she uses their bathroom, she like eats a bunch of food and then she ends up falling asleep on the couch and wakes up because the owner comes home. I'm here for it. I'm excited for it. I think it's gonna be good. The next one is another one that I, funnily enough, found in two places. I ended up sharing the screenshot here of me finding it on Kindle Unlimited, but I did also then see the sequel over on Instagram and I was like, okay, well, the fact that it came up twice means that I definitely need to read this. This series is not going to be on KU. If I do want to read this, I will have to find it a different way, but I did download the sample. This is Taken to the Deadlands by Ella May. I have no idea if this was actually the first chapter because it was like 4 pages. It literally gave me nothing. The heroine runs a business where she like can speak to the dead. And she is essentially swindling people. And she has a cat. And like, that was it. And I was like, is that actually the first chapter? Right now, I feel a whole lot of nothing. The next one is another one that I got from Talk About Swoon. Can you tell I get my recommendations from like the same couple of people? This is Masks and Mishaps. It looks like it just came out earlier in the month. When I went to KU, I found that it is part of a series. Right now, there's 3 books. The first one is called Screams and Schemes. I'm assuming it involves them filming. It sounds like it's neighbors to lovers, so we're gonna give it a shot. I can tell you right now that this is going to be a win. The dedication for this one is, this book is dedicated to anyone who fucks as a coping mechanism. You do you. Keep coping your brains out. First chapter of this one, top tier. We're following this heroine who is a cam girl and she is on this really terrible date. And when she goes back to her condo, she's in the elevator with her neighbor who is ridiculously attractive, and she like completely clams up around him and becomes really awkward. But then this guy joins him on the elevator and is like all invasive and then touches her shoulders, and she like completely freaks out. And so the neighbor lays down the law. The two of them have this like really great moment, and she's like, absolutely can never date a lawyer. But I'm super intrigued. Their chemistry from moment one, sentence one, fantastic. I am here to film the last half of the try chapter. I apologize if the lighting is super wonky for this. It is so dark outside, almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's not raining, but it looks like it should be. It's so dark. I have all of the lights turned on, but it's still, like, to me, it looks super grainy. So hopefully the lighting isn't terrible. I also have the window open. Hopefully that's not messing with the sound. So I have about 2 hours before I have to go get my daughter from daycare. We're gonna try to get as many of these read. The first book is, I think, the only book that I added from BookTube. Izzy's like mafia try chapter, Riches to Riches. I literally have no idea what this is about. I'm sure she talked about it in there. Zero memory. I'm gonna go read the first chapter. We'll see if I learn any more. I just finished the first chapter of Riches to Riches, and I'm kind of obsessed. So much happened in that first chapter. The author's note absolutely cracked me up. Our heroine is an Italian mafia boss. She is also a serial killer, and she kills people who sexually assault women and get away with it. And so it opens up with her killing a guy who just got acquitted. It's alluded to the fact that she does this to process her own trauma. She then leaves the murder dungeon to go on a date with this guy that she has been seeing. They are gonna sleep together for the first time. And they do. And they tell each other that they love each other. And then she notices that he has a tattoo, and it has the last name of the rival mafia family, who's also the mafia family that apparently tortured her. If you had told me at the beginning of this video that there would be multiple mafia romances that I want to read, I would not have believed you. Next up is another recommendation from Tori Loves HEAs. This book, Part-Time Husband. When I went and looked at it, this is Claire Kent. She writes under both pen names. I am obsessed with Claire Kent. I had no idea that she had a second pen name. So obviously I need to download that. I'm really hoping that I love this as much as her sci-fi post-apocalyptic ones, because I think she writes exclusively contemporary under this pen name. So let's see how it goes. I don't think I'm going to finish the first chapter of this. Here's the thing. It's not that it's bad, but the first chapter is written in second person, and I hate second person. I hate it. She's talking to the reader, so it's like, maybe you wonder why I stay on at Pop's Home Cooking when I could get a good job elsewhere. I hated that. Plus, this first chapter is 25 minutes long. So I don't think that one's going to be for me. Next one is one that I found like right on my homepage on Instagram, because apparently Mira Books acquired a trilogy. First book is still out on Kindle Unlimited, On Wings of Blood, a dark academia fantasy romance. I know literally nothing else about it. I assume it's going to be leaving KU, so I wanted to grab it to give it a try before it disappears. This second round is not going as well. I also hate how this one is written. It is very like staccato. If you weren't a musician, I don't know if you know what that means. A figure appeared at the edge of my vision. It was a man, small and wiry. He had a smirk upon his lips, a row of yellowed teeth. And like that keeps happening. There'll be like a long sentence and then like 5 short ones. His voice cracked the air, loud, deep, commanding. Every single page, it's like that. Like, why? Why is it like that? The next book is one that I can't read the first chapter of because it's not out yet, and that is The Hollow Society by Rachel Lee, a psychology major who thought she was escaping her past when she transferred to Wexley University until anonymous threats, whispered secrets, and a masked stalker pull her into a secret society her father once betrayed. Now hunted by the very legacy she's trying to outrun, she must choose. expose the truth or embrace the darkness they believe she was born for. And this is going to be released from Bramble. Next up is a book that I've seen everywhere. I'm showing you here that Booked with Allie shared this, but this is one of those books that like keeps popping up on my Instagram, and I was like, you know what, we're gonna give it a try. Is it called Bourbon and Lies? I have no idea what it's about, but this cover artist has kind of blown up recently. We're gonna give it a shot. I just finished the first chapter of Bourbon and Lies, and it was really sad. We open up with our hero who is in charge of a K9 unit in like a small town in Kentucky. He gets a call from an officer. They think there's like sex trafficking or ring happening in this like abandoned farm, and they're like, we think we found somebody. And so she calls for backup, and he's like, wait for backup. She's like, nope, I'm going in, I hear voices. He rushes there, and when he gets there, she's bleeding out, and you learn that they have been together in secret, and she dies in his arms. And then we flash forward 5 years. Super depressed now. For now, I am still intrigued enough to continue on and at least give it a shot. The next book I added, I found on Threads, and I'm almost never on Threads because quite honestly, it is just an echo chamber of people complaining all the time. Sometimes on my Instagram, I do get like little suggestions, and I think that's how I found this one. It was from an author who talked about how they got tagged in a negative review, which is absolutely tragic. I ended up going to her page and went and looked up the first book, which is called Unholy Bonds, and it's a dark serial killer romance, which is the exact vibe. JK. I didn't make it through the content warnings. This has drug abuse, stalking, murder, sexual assault, rape, physical abuse, mental abuse, child abuse, molestation, manipulation, murder of a parent, suicide, stalking, fetal death, kidnapping, anxiety, mental illness, decapitation, drowning, hanging, serial killers doing serial killer things, twisted games, torture, blood and gore, graphic violence, profanity, knife play, breath play, edging, kink, BDSM, and it keeps going. They lost me at fetal death, so we're gonna not. That is it for the individual screenshots. I am now going to pop up a recording of me going through my saved folder on Instagram. So we're just going to go through this, and I'm going to talk about which ones I've added and why and stuff like that. I don't think there's a single one on here that I can read. First is West of Wicked by Nikki St. Crow, which is the start of a new series from her coming out from Bramble. This is the author of, is it the Lost Boys Quartet? This one is a reimagining of The Wizard of Oz. All of her books are dark romances. The next one is called Female Fantasy. I'm obsessed with this cover. This is the first book being released. Apparently Cosmo is going to be publishing books. I think like the heroine falls in love with the hero of a romance book. BK Borison just released the cover of her next book, which is called And Now Back to You, which is like a meteorology romance. Slowburn Reads' first fantasy romance, A Vow in Vengeance, that's coming out in 2026. This one is an Enemies to Lovers tarot inspired. This one is not yet on Goodreads, a new book from an author that I have tried once and didn't love. It's called All of Us Murderers by KJ Charles, and it's coming out in October. And it's like a paranormal mystery romance. There's ghosts. I think it's set at a manor. It sounds really good. I also have Madge Merrill's next two books. Madge Merrill wrote Slipstream, which I will be reading in an upcoming vlog. She got picked up for the sequel, which is called The Paddock Club, which is another Formula One romance. And she actually got picked up for a fencing romance called On Guard, which funnily enough, I have a fencing romance called On Guard already on my TBR. Just a Taste by Anise Starr is a holiday romance that is coming out later this year, but this is a new book from her that's coming out in October, and I will be holding on to this one, obviously, for the Christmas time. Saxon James's upcoming release, which I assume called Wild's End. We know essentially nothing about this. She's just releasing teasers right now, but it comes out in September. I don't know if it's tied to her other series. I assume so, but I have no idea. Then we have Celine Ang's upcoming books. She got picked up for two books. First is Hold Me Like a Grudge, which is a queer boxing romance, and the other one is called Loser New Year. Loser New Year is not yet on Goodreads, but Hold Me Like a Grudge is, because that one comes out in 2026. I think the other one doesn't come out until 2027. Then I have two books by Laura Piper Lee, who I've literally never heard of, but these popped up in my like For You page, and they sound amazing. The first one is called Hotshot, which is about a heroine with Crohn's disease who opens up a weed dispensary. I have ulcerative colitis, which is like essentially the same thing as Crohn's, but it's isolated to just my large intestine. And the other one is called Doomsday, which is a paranormal rom-com that's similar to Zombieland. Neither one of these is on Goodreads. Then we have a book that is going to be self-pubbed. It's not on Goodreads yet. I think I saw this on EA Noble's story, and this cover is stunning. It's called May Chaos Reign Over You. It's a sapphic fantasy romance, follows the embodiment of chaos and the dragon Alpha in love with her. Say nothing else. Then Shae, who is an author that I have read from before, is releasing a new book called Violent Thing. It doesn't have a release date. It's just coming out in June at some point. I don't think it has a full synopsis yet, but I want to give it a shot. And then Elle May is an author that I think was on here already. She has another book coming out called Love Me Not, which is a sapphic billionaire romance. It's CEO Nanny, and it has a lesbian dom in it. I'll do anything to please you, sir. I really want it. Here's the cover. It did get a cover reveal semi-recently. Another debut that's coming is Strange Familiars, which is a contemporary fantasy romance. It's set in an alternate universe, magical veterinarians, and we have two academic rivals. This one is on Goodreads. It doesn't come out until May of 2026. Next is a cover reveal. The cover of this one is 100% what got me. This comes out in the fall. It's called Dance for Demons, and I think it's a monster carnival romance. Coming in January, we have All We Have Is Time, which is compared to The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which is how it got me. This is another debut author. Kiss, Marry, Kill, a rom-com about a podcaster. And it's set in the Midwest, which I want to say that this one is actually set in Wisconsin, if I remember correct. The next, Lila Sage. I do not like cowboy romances, and so this is an author I have never read from before. But this is a contemporary paranormal romance. The cover is fucking fantastic. This one features a haunted house. It's going to be my first Lila Sage. I am quite excited for it. And then the last book, Swipe Bite by Alexandra Vosti, which is a paranormal mystery romance featuring a icy vampire heiress and a human software engineer. Love it. So that is the last of the books that I had saved to my Instagram. The last thing we're going to do is we are going to go through my Goodreads and see if I missed anything. So I have a recording going for my Goodreads. I assume I'm going to like overlay it here. So these first couple of them are all ones that you saw from my Instagram saved section. Then we have a couple of ones that I read that for whatever reason just weren't on my TBR. I don't know how All Superheroes Need PR and Behooved weren't there, but they weren't. We have the Book of Blood and Roses by Annie Summerly is coming out in January of 2026. It is a sapphic paranormal fantasy vampire hunter. I don't even remember how I found this. Probably through who's the publisher? Yeah, the publisher is Del Rey. They probably shared the cover reveal or something like that. The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. It's a fantasy romance from Bramble. Oh, it has a cover. This is following a heroine who has to become the concubine to the prince, and the prince has like poetry magic, and in order to like save everyone, she needs to fall in love with the prince, because in order to wield the magic, you have to be in love or something like that. This one comes out in January. That is all of the books that I added to my Goodreads TBR. So I completely forgot to film an outro, and I really need to get this video posted. And I'm going to pop up all of the books here that I am going to be reading in that part 2 vlog. So that is going to be it for this collab. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.